This is Heart Pocket Podcast number 367 for October 21st, 2025.
Heart Pocket Podcast, seeking to align our hearts with God's heart, making our hearts more like the heart of Jesus.
This is the second half of the story from last week. We will review the story and then continue with the spiritual observations.
And that's where our story from God's Word begins. As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve him with a willing heart. A loyal heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands all intent of the mind. For if you search for God, He will let you find Him. But if you forsake God, He will forget you forever. Consider this. The Lord has chosen you to build the house for the sanctuary. Be strong and do it. And so David gave his son Solomon the plans for the porch of the temple, for the buildings, for its storehouses, its upper rooms, its inner rooms, and the room for the mercy seat. And plans of all that was given by the Spirit. The courts of the house of God, all the surrounding rooms, the storehouses of the house of God, and the storehouses of the dedicated things. And that's our story from God's Word. So I think we mentioned in our part of our discussion that Solomon was taught probably different than others. Does he have knowledge of God?
I think you have to come back to defining knowledge in the sense that to have knowledge is to know or actually to experience. And I think that there's a reason why it's both there. I think there's this aspect of you've got to have both. So I just really think there's one informs the other.
Well, and I do think that word knowledge trips us up in the modern world. Because, I think in the Old Testament, Adam knew his wife, and that was an intimate knowledge beyond just, oh, hey there, nice to meet
right.
you. And that same word is used throughout the Old Testament as the way we're supposed to know God, not in any kind of twisted sexual
sure.
way, but rather that there's an intimacy there. It's relational. Not just that we know about him, but we know him.
Yeah, we've redefined words in our society today.
Which is partly why I was
don't even realize it.
Driving at this knowledge and know, because I do think you got to have knowledge who is God, but I think as Andrew's talking more about heart, I think that's why David comes in here, right, and says you got to serve him with a loyal heart and a willing mind. There's aspects of knowledge and heart, and they got to be combined. And
all of that's also included in to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. So it's all in there, but it's in a different order.
And doesn't David jump out and say, because if you'll remember, he instructs or gives, I guess in some ways, both a positive and a negative. If you seek God, what will happen?
Then you will find him.
You're going to find him.
He will allow you to find him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what might be David's intent as he's trying to explain or express to Solomon, I got this positive negative. If you'll search for God, he'll let you find him. But if you forsake him, he's going to forget you forever.
That's scary.
That's a tough statement, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a choice on both sides of that coin. You have a choice to seek God, but God also has a choice if you don't.
I mean, David has a really good example in Saul of what happened to him when he forgot God.
True.
And so I think that's even brought out in Psalm 51. And I think that there's been a couple of examples, Cain and Abel, where when you forget God.
Well, even as I mentioned, sort of trying to prepare you for this story, I think I mentioned there's been a few occasions that David didn't necessarily. So, sort of what I struggle with a little bit about here is it says that if you forsake God, that He'll forget you forever. What does that tell us about God, mercy, forgiveness?
Seems that God is not under any obligation to show it. I mean, sometimes the way you hear people talk, I read something recently kind of bugged me a little bit. It was like, just try it out, just see if it works. And it's like, whoa, hang on a second. Especially looking at something like this, it's like he's under no obligation.
I think that there's something about the word forsake, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are people who turn away for a time.
Yes.
But in their heart of hearts, they actually haven't been able to forsake, right?
And I love that, Susan, because what does David tell Solomon about what God does? That he searches what?
The heart and the mind.
He searches the heart and knows the intent of the mind. So could that give us some insight on how God perceives when people may, like you said, step away, like David did on a few occasions, stepped away from God? Does God still know David's heart?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He walked perfectly except for the matter of Uriah. So that's what God thought about David.
It's interesting, though, here that it's a strong statement as the public's listening that if you forsake, which I believe against driving at this heart issue, that he's going to forget you forever. There's no connection there. And I think that's important in many ways.
Would you repeat that again?
What I just said? Mm-hmm. Listen next time.
Or could you?
There's a difference.
Listen to the recording. So
So you can't.
Pay attention.
Like that.
I think it's interesting that he's doing this publicly, but he's speaking specifically to Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
So that everybody hears it, though, to hold him accountable.
I hadn't thought about the accountability aspect. That's pretty good.
And also to be provoked. I mean, you can provoke a whole nation. We've seen it, with other kings, that a whole nation could be turned by the leading of the king.
For good and ill.
Because if it's important for Solomon to do those things, what could David be saying to the nation of Israel?
Guess what? Y'all got skills. You're gonna be coming to the table soon.
So let's. So I was, for me, thinking today, are there things that in our life that we want to do that God sometimes says you're not the right person? There's someone else. Does God?
Yeah.
Does God? And what does that look like in our world today? Maybe in ministry or.
Well, I mean, and you say that, and my dad was a pretty heavy drinker and very violent man. And I was pastoring a church in Florida that we had started, and my dad said, I'm going to come through and visit. The kids were little, and we'll go fishing together. And I was like, man, this is my chance to witness to my dad. And I went to the Christian bookstore. I bought literally a bag of tracts. He couldn't have read all those tracts in a year. So I was just going to like dump the whole Bible on him once we got out there in the boat. And I planned in my head. I spent like 2 weeks preparing where I was going to go, the conversation I was going to have. And he got there, and I helped him load his cooler full of beer in the boat, and we got on the water, and I'm like, man, I'm out there with my dad. He doesn't have any place to go. And the Lord said, you're not the one, and it's not the time. And I'm like, yes, I am. Yes, it is. And it was one of the hardest things ever to be told not to witness to my father. And I'm like, okay, is that you, Lord? Is that my flesh afraid of what might happen? Then I'm having a whole nother struggle.
It's all in your head, too.
I'm like,
A lot of room to roam.
and then later on, after my dad died and I was getting ready to preach his funeral, I found out that there was a neighbor who loved the Lord, that God called him to invest in my dad spiritually.
Wow.
And my dad was receptive to what this neighbor had done. And who knows whether I might have, messed that up in some way in my zeal and my love for my father.
Sure.
Right? But that's, I still, every time I think of God saying no, God told me not to witness. Share that in most Baptist churches and see what they're doing.
I'm feeling worse than
That's a good sermon right there, right? But
I recently had to advise a leader something very similar relating to discipleship, because one lady and this other gal she knows, I guess, was recently saved or something. I think this gal also has some other issues, intellectually or whatnot. And they just don't really get along that well. Frankly, I can tell this leader does not like this other girl. She's admitted to me she don't like her.
You can tell her she admitted it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like, it's not, so it's pretty obvious. She's like, oh my gosh, I gotta deal with her again. And so she tells me a story, and she is all about it because she's like, she was jumping in and saying this, and I told her, in front of these other people, as Christians, we don't take credit for these things. We don't. And I said, tell me about that. Why did you do that? What do you think was being accomplished? She goes, well, we got to disciple people. And I said, let me ask you something. Did you do that because you really were trying to help her out and felt like, that she was really going to listen to me in this moment, and this is really going to help? Or because you're like, this is annoying and I want her to shut up? And she's like, because I want her to shut her mouth. And I said, okay. I said, so if that's the case, I said, tell me, do you really think that you're a person to disciple her? Do you really think this is possible? I mean, because they seem to have a lot of tension in their relationship in both ways. She goes, well, I mean, aren't we obligated to disciple everybody?
Yeah.
And I said, according to what? I said, I mean, how can you? I said, first of all, you don't know everybody. But I said, second of all, if you were going to disciple everyone you know, I said, that would include people apparently like this that you don't even like. And I said, so how much good are you doing her? Tell me that. And she goes, probably not much. And I said, and do you feel like the love of Jesus is coming through you as you're saying this? She goes, no way. I said, okay, so I think that's a pretty good indication that maybe you're not the person to disciple this gal. She goes, so what do I do? I said, well, you can always trust God with her, and you can pray that he maybe brings somebody else into her life. She goes, that's really freeing. I feel like I've had the guilt trip laid on me for however many years that I got to disciple everybody I meet. And so that was a bit startling to kind of realize that is a mindset that's out there, and kind of helping her see that. And she's like, my heart isn't right in this. I'm not discipling at all. This is not even what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I really like that, because you connect what Brooke just said about that it wasn't, and Butch mentioned there's a neighbor. So today, in our story, it's, David told Solomon, you need to remember, consider this, the Lord has chosen you. So today, does God still choose specific people to carry out specific tasks he wants accomplished? And what does that look like?
We have to trust him that even though this lady is irritant to one another, she needs to trust that the Lord's going to bring somebody else along who can be more patient and loving with her versus her trying to do it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what believers are not irritants.
Me.
Well, yeah, you are the exception.
Thank you.
What a discipleship opportunity.
But if you took that one step further, I mean, has God ever come to you and specifically said, I go either side. You're not the person to do this, like Butch has shared, or this is a specific task that I have chosen you to do. Andrew.
God chose me to take over for Dorothy. I still am trying to figure out why.
Yeah.
She was far better at this job and this role than I am. And there are way more qualified people. So why?
You don't have to mention it.
And believe me, it didn't even come to mind. And it's just one of those things where I still, almost every day, go, Lord, I don't understand. I know you put me here. What is it you want me to be doing? So that's a challenge. And I've had the other side of the coin, like with my dad, where I feel like God took me out of the picture so that he could work on my dad and not me.
Right.
So those are two examples of both of those.
Do you find it, and the rest of you can pipe in, do you find it interesting that in our story here, that David, nor even God, as David alludes that God chose Solomon, never brought up qualifications?
Do I find it what?
Interesting, or?
Yeah, I guess you could use the word interesting, but qualifications, honestly, we all start out with 0 qualifications. And even when people are hired for certain jobs, they may have a college education, but no experience, or,
Sure.
Somebody becomes a pastor in a church.
Sure.
They may have been trained, but where's their experience? So parents are the most classic example. God gives one of the most incredible jobs to people who have never had kids to raise them. And so I don't know if it actually is humorous to me. But it's throughout life, I think, with a lot of us. And sometimes I think the danger is to have so much experience, we stop listening to the Lord. That's the scary part.
I think that's really interesting, especially as to do with the life of David. Because he was a know-nothing shepherd who'd been back on, and all of a sudden God says, it's not all of you, y'all look great, but your heart's not right. So I think it goes back to, does God qualify the called, or does God call the qualified? And I think that's a process.
And I don't necessarily disagree, except for the fact in this story, David gives Solomon really 2 specific things to do, right?
Yes, it is.
Know God, serve God.
You didn't say anything about qualifications.
And he didn't say you had to, and so I think if we're not careful, we try to rationalize our abilities when, I think you said it, Steve, the reason God chose David over his brothers was because, even in this story it says, God's able to search all hearts. He knew every one of those brothers' hearts, and he knew David's. He knew who was the right king. For me, as a pastor, it's encouraging. Is it helpful to have qualifications? Well, absolutely. To have experience, yeah. But in the end, the good news for me, I just need to know God, and I need to serve Him with a loyal heart and a willing mind. And that will get me to where God intends me to be, which is, in this story, build a temple. My question to you to think about as we leave, for you to ponder and go forward is, Do you know God? And do you serve him with a loyal heart and a willing mind? That's what I'd ask you to think about. And this passage is found in 1 Chronicles 28, 9 through 12. And I would encourage you to read the entire chapter, because Susan mentioned something that if you keep reading down through here, that she said David didn't trust Solomon, and that's why David was giving him all this stuff. If you'll keep reading, you'll find out that David says, and I received these plans from the Spirit. So there's a reason he has plans, that God enabled him to play a role. And he still reminds, at the very end of the chapter, he reminds Solomon, you need to be strong and courageous, and do not fear or be dismayed, for the Lord will never leave you until you finish this task. That is good news. So thank you for letting me share it.
Tune in next week for another episode of Heart Pocket Podcast, and feel free to subscribe on iTunes. For those who wish to have more information about Simply the Story trainings, please feel free to contact the office at info@simplythestory.org or call us at 951-658-1619. You can also visit our website at simplythestory.org. And now you can watch God's story in hundreds of languages just from our simplythestory.org website.
You've been listening to Heart Pocket Podcast, hiding God's Word in our heart pockets, changing the world one heart at a time.
When it sings of glory, I sing the new soul. Will be the old story that I have loved so long.